An NBA analyst is pushing for a serious Toronto Raptors decision, as despite the fact Masai Ujiri gave Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley massive extensions to be the cornerstones of this team, they're pushing for the Toronto Raptors to tank away this upcoming season, trading away guys like Jakob Poeltl, Bruce Brown, and leaning into that direction of losing a ton of games despite being on the brink of a team that could be in the play-in or could be one of those bottom-tier teams in the Eastern Conference. So we're going to dive into this argument, whether or not it makes sense, because I know a lot of Toronto Raptors fans are divided on this front, whether or not the Toronto Raptors should start off the season and compete or really just bottom out right from the jump and lean into the Cooper flag sweepstakes. So lots of stuff to dive into in this video, but before we do, folks, again, if you're part of the over 50% that hasn't hit the subscribe button, make sure you guys hit that sub button so you don't miss a single thing regarding this Toronto Raptors during this off season as we ramp things up leading into training camp, preseason, and obviously this NBA year. But basically, rather than ramping up this team, well, obviously the team will be training, practicing, getting better with the young developing guys that we have on this roster, Zach Buckley of Bleacher Report has essentially come out and said that the Toronto Raptors need to already thrown the towel, just tank away this upcoming season. As essentially, he came out on his article of Bleacher Report and said that the Toronto took several steps forward in the future with last season's subtractions of Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. The Raptors didn't go with a full-on reset, though. What they really did was align their roster around 23-year-old centerpiece Scottie Barnes, who was subsequently inked to a 5-year maximum extension this summer. And when they moved away from Anunoby, they built their return around two potential building blocks in Barnes, who's 25 years old, and 25-year-old Immanuel Quickley, who signed a $175 million deal, and 24-year-old RJ Barrett, who spent his summer supplying Canada's the second most points per game in the Olympics. So again, we all know this, nothing crazy novel here. The Toronto Raptors didn't go with a full-out rebuild during the trades of OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. We kind of retooled, remodeled this roster to still be competitive, not completely bottom out, didn't go completely for draft picks, but be more aligned with the Scottie Barnes future, more aligned with the Scottie Barnes timeline. But this is where Buckley comes in and is saying where he disagrees the strategy a little bit. And he's saying that could be a very strong nucleus eventually. Gradey Dick also started coming into his own late into his rookie season, and it's possible Toronto plucked a pair of potential rotation players in Jakob Poeltl and Jonathan Mobo in this year's NBA draft. The roster could come together rather quickly. It just doesn't need to happen next season. When there's a chance of nabbing possibly a transcendental talent, the Raptors have some interesting young pieces, but they don't have a game changer of that caliber. So is it a possible play-in berth really enough of a reward to ditch the dream of landing a top prospect like a Cooper flag in a world? Nah. Even if Toronto snuck into the first round, it would get obliterated upon arrival. And before arguing for the benefits of experience in the playoffs, just remember that Barnes, Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett all have postseason contests under their belt. So Zach Buckley came out with a pretty interesting kind of discussion and argument in regards to the Toronto Raptors really tanking away from the start of this season. You look at the roster, again, it doesn't look like a squad that's going to be extremely scaring a lot of teams in the NBA in terms of, an upper echelon playoff team based off how it currently looks. Obviously, we could get some serious development, and guys like Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes could take their games to the next level, and this will silence everybody. But we still have Bruce Brown, we still have Jakob Poeltl on this roster, so some vets. We brought back Kelly Olynyk, who seems to be around for the long-ish term. Chris Boucher's still on this team, who didn't get much run in Darko Rajakovic's system last year, and we did get some exciting acquisitions. Davion Mitchell in the offseason, and Jakob Poeltl, Mobo, all these types of guys. And then we also have Gradey Dick, Ochai Agbaji. There are some interesting pieces on this team, but again, I'd agree with Buckley that this isn't a team that projects to be a dominant force out there in the Eastern Conference for the upcoming season. For this specific upcoming season. So what should we do, right? Because again, if we sort of push for the first round play-in and stuff, do we just kind of get that experience and run with it, or do we try to go for a Cooper flag and amongst these types of things? And personally, I think this is going to be a question that gets answered for us pretty early on in the season. If you're not familiar, basically, I made videos on it already. The Toronto Raptors have a very, very difficult schedule to start off this year. So we're facing upper echelon, like 9 out of 10 of our first games are against upper echelon playoff projected teams, and the Charlotte Hornets, who also are projected to be pretty decent this upcoming year. So if we start off the season 1-9, if we, in the first 10 games, first 15 games, where we have one of the toughest schedules in the entire NBA, if we go out there and just absolutely get slapped, get cheesed, and, win 1, 2, 3 games out of that first, the decision's going to answer itself. Like last season, we still had Pascal OG on the group. We had some moments where we were highs and lows and stuff for the first 2 months of the season, and we ended up being very mid-level. But if this team isn't positioned, if Scottie Barnes, and this is something I'm excited about, to see what Scottie Barnes' kind of development looks like, because, again, just got that big contract, took a major leap last season. If he doesn't take that, his skill level to a jump to where he can really carry this team to be a proper playoff squad for the season, we're going to know in the first 15 to 20 games of this upcoming year. So I don't think it's a big thing for the Toronto Raptors to go into this year and be like, hey, we're going to tank this, we're going to do bad, we're going to do X, Y, Z. I think in the first month of this season, we're going to know where this team is at talent-wise, what they're able to do, and maybe it's unfair for a young, rebuilding, or developing team to only have, 10, 20 games to really prove themselves. But if after that first 10, 20 games, we're in the bottom of the pack in the Eastern Conference, I think it's time to really blow it up. And I agree with Zach Buckley, right? These guys already have playoff experience. They're locked in long-term. So 1 year of really bottoming out and selling for a Cooper Flag or one of these top potential prospects in the NBA does make a ton of sense. So what does that mean kind of for this roster construction going forward? Because we have vets like Jakob Poeltl who could command pretty decent returns out there on the open market. A team like the New Orleans Pelicans, who are depleted at that center position, the New York Knicks are also a squad where they're trying to win right away at this moment. And if Mitchell Robinson is able to stay healthy, the Pelicans, the Knicks, those are two teams I think would be very, very willing to acquire a Jakob Poeltl who can really bring it on the defensive end. Isn't much of a floor spacer, so does he fit Scottie Barnes' timeline long term? But the Raptors have some assets there, right? We also have a Bruce Brown who has, obviously, anyone that's been following the Toronto Raptors the past year or so knows that there's a lot of teams interested in Bruce Brown, but Masai Ujiri isn't going to give him up for nothing. So if the Raptors did make trades and got Bruce Brown, draft picks back for Bruce Brown, got draft picks back for Jakob Poeltl, get anything of value back for Chris Boucher, get off that salary, our flexibility is kind of back into the mix for the future of this franchise, and we can build up our draft stocks for the future in terms of how all these young guys are going to perform, build out this young core group around that Scottie timeline, and maybe not even draft picks, just younger players that more so fit that RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes, and Immanuel Quickley timeline for the future of this organization. So I don't think it's smart for this team to, again, come into next year because we saw a major, major leap from Scottie Barnes last year, and I don't think it's worth it to, build that sort of negative losing culture right away when we don't have to. Scottie averaged 20 points per game, 8 rebounds, 6 assists for this team last season, and if he continues to improve his jump shot, which it looks like he has over the course of this offseason, right, if he continues to develop in those areas, maybe Scottie Barnes in his own right can be that transcendental star that puts us into the playoff mix with competent players around him. We end up being buyers out there at the trade deadline because we win a few games at the start of the season. So again, it's required an early jump on the development, and I don't want to rush anything, but I think we're going to have a very, very strong feel for how this Toronto Raptors team is going to look, to start off the season pretty early on. But I know the Raptors fans are pretty split on it. I'm not split. I'm maintain the belief that after 20 games, this decision should be made. Not later, not right at the trade deadline. After 15, 20 games, we need a good look at this roster, and then if things are looking bad, probably fire sale it. But, we're going to have a tough schedule, so if things are kind of mid and we're beating good teams, then maybe run it back, see how it's going, push the can down the road, kick the can down the road for the Jakob Poeltls, for the Bruce Browns, those types of trades. But, if things aren't good for the start of the season, don't keep beating a dead horse. Facilitate that rebuild. Do what we kind of did last season with, less upper echelon talent in Pascal than Pascal and OG Anunoby and Jakob Poeltl, Bruce Brown, but still players you can get some serious value back for. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about what the Toronto Raptors should do moving forward for this team. You guys are the best. Make sure you hit that sub button. I'm signing out. Cheers.